Once upon a time, not so long ago, it was feared that children had lost any interest in reading books. With television and video games growing in popularity, reading was something that just didn't appeal. At least, that's what all the adults back then used to say. And many movies which encouraged that love of reading, of delving into books, were made. This year, we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of one of those movies, perhaps the most popular one that goes on to be remembered for its story, characters, and perhaps most importantly, its music. Having not seen it in years myself, let's take a look at what most people consider to be a classic, The Never-Ending Story. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am your ever-friendly Pokeprof, and welcome back to Fascinating Fiction. It's been a little while since we've done an anniversary episode where we talk about something that's been around for a while, and this is something that I remembered near and dear to my childhood. But it's also one of those movies that I've never learned much about after I had watched it way back when, and it's something that I've only ever seen mentioned in passing. So instead of diving right into the movie, I wanted to talk about some of its backstory since most of this I didn't know at all. Perhaps the biggest bombshell comes from the fact that not only is A Never-Ending Story based off a book, but the fact that both its book and the movie itself are German in origin. The original book was written by German author Michael Ende, who actually wrote a number of other works, though most of them stayed within Germany. Its movie counterpart was directed by Wolfgang Petersen in his first ever English movie, with him going on to create several other films, though the only one I'm personally familiar with is Air Force One. Initially happy with the idea of his book being made into a movie, Ende actually worked with Petersen as a script advisor to help with the film, but eventually hated what it became. So chalk up another movie for having its original creator hating what was done to it. But that often doesn't mean anything when it comes to the audience, which the film itself was considered pretty well regarded, at least enough so that a lot of its aspects were carried on to this day, though none so more than its music, particularly the main theme itself. What's interesting to consider is that the song I'm playing wasn't in the German film of the movie. It's amazing what a difference in culture and what becomes popular when considering that most kids born in the 80s and 90s could probably sing this song by heart, where it simply just wasn't a thing for those in Germany. Though if I'm entirely honest, it probably makes a bit of sense once we actually see some of the themes of the film. Getting to the movie proper, we focus on Bastian Balthazar Bucks, though we'll know him only as Bastian throughout the film. We're immediately get hit with the triple whammy of sympathetic child tropes, with a dead mother, an estranged father who doesn't understand him, and childhood bullies. Like all tropes, it's all on how you use them that makes them good or bad, but we'll never see Bastian's dad after the scene, and the bullies only really serve as an inciting incident. These are simply there to give us a feeling that we should care about Bastian without any real depth. It's escaping those bullies that leads us to an old bookstore, its owner reading the titular Never-Ending Story. After learning that Bastian is an avid reader, reading some of those old classics that even I've never touched, the owner says that this book is different, how the others that Bastian has read so far are safe. Curiosity gets the better of him, however, and Bastian steals the book to go read it, though he does leave a note claiming he'll return it later. Skipping class after coming in late enough to miss part of it, Bastian makes his way up to the attic where he hangs out for the rest of the movie. This is where we get that back and forth between reality and the story he's reading, like what we had with The Princess Bride. Though I feel like that movie did it a lot better, especially considering Bastian's poor actor here is having to carry most of the scenes by himself from this point to almost the very end of the film. After being introduced to a collection of misfit characters to show us the wide-reaching flavor of this land of Fantasia, something that was known as Fantastica in the original book, we learn from these characters that a force known only as the Nothing has started to seep within the land. The best way to describe it is essentially non-existence, a distinct lack of anything being there. As a Rockbiter puts it when asked if it was like a hole had been left over,
A hole would be something. No, it was nothing.
Learning that this has been happening in all the corners of Fantasia, the group rush to the Ivory Tower to ask the Empress of their land for help, only to learn that she's grown ill. They recruit a warrior from the Plainsfolk tribe known as Atreyu, who will serve as the champion that will learn for a way to cure the Empress and stop the Nothing. There's a bit of a mild freakout when Atreyu turns out to be a rather androgynous-looking young boy instead of a man, but realizing it's either this or destruction, they take what they can get. Atreyu must go alone and weaponless, neither of which are properly explained why he must do so, and is given the pendant known as Orin, which kinda serves as just a fun symbol, at least in this film. So this next part is kind of weird for me. We get a small montage of Atreyu riding his horse Artax throughout various landscapes under the narration of Bastian talking about the different places they visited. If these places were actually present within the book, I'm uncertain, but it eventually leads to the Swamps of Sadness. Yeah, most of you know where this is heading if you're even passingly familiar with this film. The swamps, being a magical place like the rest of Fantasia, will cause anyone who holds sadness in their heart to sink and be swallowed up by the mire. And this is where we lose Artax, the horse sinking into the depths. This is a scene that, as kids, struck a lot of us pretty hard. As an adult, however, and watching this movie while giving it a serious critique, the scene just doesn't hold up. Do you want to know how long we've been around and seen Artax in the film at this point? 5 minutes. That's all. That's the only amount of time we get to spend with Artax before they're killed off. This is going back to the thing I was mentioning with Bastian earlier, where we're given the idea of the feeling that they're wanting to evoke with us, but it's shallow. We're not so much sad that Artax died, as we are sad because of how it hurts Atreyu. I think the reason this hit so many kids as hard as it did back in the day came down to the fact that death wasn't a common thing to see in kids' films, especially in the 80s. And death by slowly sinking until you drown? Yeah, not a nice way to go. This is where we meet up with Morla, the Ancient One, which I only mention because she is one of those rare instances I've ever run into where we get the old, wise, ancient creature that gives out knowledge who actually doesn't know the answer. Like, it's a subversion of the trope that is almost always played straight, and that's something I can very much enjoy. But it also builds into another problem that we'll run into as she points us towards the Southern Oracle, 10,000 miles away. Something I'll explain a bit better once we get there. We spend a little more time in the swamps, watching as Atreyu slowly starts to sink into the muck. This is where we get introduced to the Gamork for all of a minute before he's gone until the end of the film, and Falkor, who comes in and saves Atreyu from sinking completely into the swamp, and carries him most of the way to the Southern Oracle. Now, before anything else is to be said, Falkor is one of my favorite characters. He is a big, dopey dragon dog and deserves all of the ear scratches. But he comes out of frickin' nowhere to save Atreyu. We get nothing about his backstory, nothing that explains why he suddenly appears. He just pops into the story to help out with the plot. I read somewhere that in the book, Falkor is apparently a protector of the weak, and that he uses the fact that he's a luck dragon to help those in need, which is why he's there for Atreyu now. But this is never explained in the movie. He is a pretty blatant deus ex machina, even if he's one of my favorite characters. It's as we get introduced to the gnome professor and his wife that we really understand the biggest weakness of the film, the directionless quest itself. From the very start of us being within the fantasy side of the movie, we never really get a straight answer to what we need to do or where we need to go. Every time we think we get the answer, we're pushed on to the next task at hand and led into a completely another direction. We have our misfit characters like Rockbiter go to the Empress to try and stop the Nothing, but she can't help. So we have Atreyu go searching for answers. Even if it's just a montage, Atreyu goes through at least 3 other areas before getting to the swamp, and even then, Morla just points us to the Southern Oracle. Then it happens again here, where the professor points Atreyu exactly where they need to go to continue their quest. And trust me when I say, this won't end. It's the trials of the Oracle that are probably the most engaging events at this point, because instead of just being aimless wandering, we actually have to have Atreyu prove themselves as capable of even reaching the Oracle. The first is a Gate of Worth, destroying anyone who doubts themselves, which we have an immediate example of. And out of everything in the movie at this point, this is one of the stronger moments for me. The reason for this is because of everything that Atreyu has been up to this point, from being doubted by the Empress's advisors, to losing Artax, to not even getting to the Oracle's gate under his own power. It's actually reasonable for him to start doubting himself. He makes it through, barely getting blasted, though Atreyu never got information on the second gate.
Atreyu has to face his true self.
Wait, Atreyu's gotta face his shadow? Huh. I wonder what his persona is going to be like. In all seriousness though, I hope you enjoy the little jokes and things with the gnomes, because after this point we're never going to be seeing them again. They kinda just vanish like Bastian's dad did. After getting a small hint to what the true nature of the movie is about, we meet up with the Southern Oracle and find out that, surprise surprise, we get pointed into another objective, this time trying to find a human child beyond the boundaries of Fantasia, because to cure the Empress, she needs a new name, and that's something that apparently only a human can do. I'll explain the actual reasoning about this once we get to the ending proper. We then get back-to-back mood whiplash as we go from the Oracle literally crumbling apart from the nothing, to Atreyu cheering on Falcor's back as they fly throughout Fantasia, before running smack dab into the nothing again and being separated. Without the Luck Dragon, the Orin, and lost on an island being destroyed by the nothing, Atreyu's at his lowest point. This is where we get to see paintings on a wall within a cave that are telling the story that we've just gone through, before getting the return of the Gamork, who informs Atreyu of the true nature of Fantasia, how it's the world of human imagination, and the fact that the nothing represents the loss of that imagination and the ability to dream. And this is where we get back to the point I was making before about the pointless quest, since the big bad wolf here tells us that Fantasia has no boundaries because of that true nature. You can pretty much boil everything that Atreyu has gone through to go to place A, be told that they need to go to place B, repeat process at place B. And while yes, there are movies that have done the same thing as far as their basic plot structure, everything within the movie so far feels so divorced from each other. There are moments that matter in that moment, and nothing else carries a lot of weight or importance after that moment is over. After a quick defeat of Gamork, the luck of Falcor saves Atreyu once more, but the land isn't so lucky, the nothing consuming all but a scant few fragments. We're left with Atreyu and Falcor left roaming about their non-existent home, only able to find the Ivory Tower thanks to the Orin. It's finally meeting the Empress that we get the true reveal of everything that's been going on. In the best twist of the entire movie, it's revealed to us that Atreyu's entire journey was something that the Empress had planned from the get-go. With Fantasia being the land of human imagination, the lack of those interested in the world of fantasy was killing it. They needed to find a human child, one who still loved reading and fantasy, to follow on the adventure to breathe new life into their world. That was the entire point of Atreyu's quest. And just as Bastian has been following along with Atreyu, we have been following along with Bastian, making all of us together a part of one long, never-ending story. Thus the title. It's a great reveal, honestly, and one that's been hinted at throughout the movie. This is also one of those rare kid movies to actually play that card of reminding the audience that they are indeed watching a movie and including them in on that fact. So this makes it a good first example for younger viewers about that kind of story, one that acknowledges the fourth wall. With a bit of urging from the Empress talking to him directly, Bastian shouts out her new name, Moonchild. Not a name I'd personally give to a near all-knowing Empress, but later movies in the book would have her title be the Childlike Empress, so honestly it kinda fits her well. But at this point, it's too late. The only thing left of Fantasia is a single grain of sand. Remember though, that Fantasia is the land of human imagination, their dreams and wishes. With Bastian there, a human child who believes in that fantasy of that magic, he's able to breathe life anew with his wishes. His first wish leads him to writing Falkor with the return of the misfit characters from the start of the film, Atreyu and Artax, and then Bastian using Falkor to get revenge on his bullies. Frankly, I would have thought that his first wish would be to bring his mom back to life, but I'm pretty sure the movie didn't care to go that deep, simply ending by a narrator coming out of nowhere to tell us that Bastian would go on to make many more wishes, but that's another story. Now, after everything I've gone through, all the points and issues I've pointed out with the film, you'd think I'd hate this movie, when in fact I really don't. Here's the thing to keep in mind at the core. The Neverending Story is a movie that's made for and intended for kids. While that's not to say that kids' media can't have meaning or depth, not every form of media for kids needs to have it. I personally think that having those extra bits is what elevates a film from good to great, but as I said before, I'm not the intended audience here. The Neverending Story, in many ways, is designed with these powerful moments in mind, things that will stick in the heads of kids for years. Considering how many people to this day remember Artax's death scene, it's clear that it did its job. And as kids, we don't care as much for that connective tissue. It doesn't matter that we never see Bastian's dad or the gnomes again, because they're not important for the moments of the film that it's wanting us to have. They want us to be excited at the sight of Falkor flying through the air, and sad at the Rockbiter not being able to save his friends. This is where the movie shines. It doesn't really need to be anything else, considering it's still remembered to this day because of those moments. Which boils down to the fact that, while The Neverending Story isn't as great as the film looking back on it, compared to the other things like Princess Bride, it isn't without its worth. It pushed forward the encouragement of reading, of a love of fantasy and imagination that a lot of adults would discourage normally, both back then and even now. Even with the age of the film, the visuals and music were wonderfully done, trying to spark that imagination for generations to come. While not as deep or developed as some of the other films meant for kids, it doesn't need to be. It's a simple, small adventure story that is there to please kids for a time and give them some ideas of their own. Though adults might not be able to get the best entertainment out of the film, it's something that I feel most of them could get behind as an early fantasy movie for their kids. A story that could encourage a fantasy never ending. With all that said, I hope I've done a good job to entertain you, and I'll do my best to do so again in the future. Hopefully you'll follow along with my content by subscribing and doing all the other things that gives us YouTubers life. If you wish to support me a bit more, I do have a Patreon where you can get access to bonus content. But until next time, stay frosty.